Once upon a time, in a faraway land.
What are fairy stories?
The strange and wondrous place where nothing is as it seems.
Magic mirror on the wall. Who is the fairest?
Fairy is a perilous land.
Before she found herself falling down what seemed to be a very deep well.
It is the place you visit
A world
in your
of
dreams.
myth and magic.
When the clock began to
The
chime
evening
midnight,
star sailed down through the
A
sky.
mysterious voice began calling to the sad
She
princess.
pricked her finger with her needle. 3 drops of blood fell on the
In a
small
trance,
white
she
window.
followed the haunting
And peered
sound
into
of
the
a
hollow
winding
tree.
stairway to the top of the
You can read
tower.
along with me in your book.
waved her wand and said the magic words.
Let's begin now.
Well met, witches. Welcome to Storybook, Sacred Lore of Witchcraft. Today's tale was suggested by Via Hedera. Via Hedera is a California-born, Pacific Northwest-based sculptor, folklore enthusiast, writer, and a craft practitioner dedicated to folkloric witchcraft in the Americas. Growing up in a multicultural and spiritually diverse community, she dedicates her time to the study of traditional witchcraft practices, ancestor veneration, and all things magical. Her book, Folkloric Witchcraft and the Multicultural Experience, is available on Amazon, and you can find out more from Via at viahedera.com. Hi, Via. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here. What else would you like listeners to know about yourself?
It's wonderful to be here. I really appreciate you having me on this show. It's a phenomenal show, and you cover some of the most amazing and fun stories. I'm really happy to be here. A little bit more about me is I have been recently featured in Llewellyn's Complete Book of North American Folk Magic, written by Corey Hutchinson. I'm featured in the Northwest section. I talk a little bit about multicultural magic here in the Pacific Northwest, here on traditional Salish territory, which is where I am speaking to you. I come to you from the traditional territories of the Duwamish people. It is their land that I live upon, and they are the continued sovereign stewards of their unceded territory, and I honor them.
We also have with us my returning co-host, Reverend Laura Gonzalez. Hi, Laura. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, everybody. First of all, thank you for having me back. It's been so long. I didn't realize how long it's been, and I have missed you guys. And thank you for having me. And for those who don't know me, I'm coming to you from Chicago, the land of the Potawatomi people. I am myself indigenous to Mexico, Mexican from Mexico. And I'm a minister, I'm a priestess, I'm a nature practitioner, I'm an indigenous practitioner, and I am what I call jokingly a witch for hire. That's my 24/7. I'm working towards, empowering people through magic. I'm very happy to be back here because I really missed you guys. And with this one, I'm like, what? This tale is like, it really got me scratching my head. So thank you for having me back.
Yeah, I'm so glad you're back. I feel like we could probably talk about this tale for a number of discussions if we had the chance. I have one of my other favorite circle members here today, Annabelle from AB's Witch Journal. Hi, AB.
Hi. I am Aníbal. Typically, I say, hey, please call me AB. It's easier to pronounce. Yes, AB Witch Journal is my Instagram account and YouTube channel. I try to showcase my experience as a beginner witch, let's say it like that, trying to reconnect with my Venezuelan roots when it comes to talk about spiritual practices, and also just read books overall, try to give book reviews, and yeah, let's say that I enjoy be happily surprised with magic. So I still find myself in that. Well, I don't think that any witch comes out of that phase of, oh wow, this spell worked. I you know what I mean? So this is me. That's what I do. That's what I cannot say that I have like all that big experience as Laura, but I aspire to be like that. Like Laura, I wanna get there.
Why, thank you. Thank you. You're feeding my ego, my favorite thing.
Today we're discussing The Golden Key from 1867 by George MacDonald. And Via, what inspired you to suggest this tale today?
I was transformed by this book on a spiritual level from a very young age. And as a very young witch, I resonated with it. Its themes were so personal to my life, and at that time, just developing my craft, developing my sense of nature, the elements, balance. When I came across this story, it was during this incredibly intense time in my life, and my parents were going through this divorce, and I'm leaving California. So to run into this story about children going through a great ordeal and transition and a change of their life that is outside of their control, it really resonated with me. So when you got in contact with me and the first thing I thought when I thought of some of the best fairy tales I've ever read, this is the top thing I ever think of, is this amazing story of magical and lifelong and existential transition. So I had to, because I'm looking for any excuse to get other practitioners to read this book and connect with me over it.
Yeah, George MacDonald, I don't think gets enough name recognition or love nowadays, even though he was a major influence on Tolkien and C.S. Lewis and the big names of fantasy that followed him. It's an unusual story. What kind of first reactions did everyone have?
In all honesty, when I finished, I was like, okay, anticlimactic much, I was waiting for the, but then I had a reflection and I'm like, wow, it's like you need to go back. And it's kind of like the nature of the story, where the young is old and the dead is alive and the light is darkness. And so it's like, yeah, it's the perfect ending. It reminded me a little bit The Alchemist by Pablo Coelho. Some people like to throw tomatoes at it. And it kind of reminded me of that. The end is just the beginning. It's like that which you seek has always been there, but you haven't been able to see it, which obviously Coelho is newer. So he probably got very inspired by this. And yeah, so that's kind of like my first impression for that. Like, it really made me pause and think a lot.
Following a little bit like on what Laura mentioned, which ironically, Paulo Coelho, I feel that it was like my first steps towards a non-Christian spirituality, I will say. So, for me, it was like, okay, a pathway, I will say, or maybe like that door to start walking outside of just Venezuelan Pentecostal Christianity. But anywho, completely beyond what we're talking about. The story, I felt exactly how Laura mentions, because it was giving me a lot of fantasy. But also at the same time, I was like, is this an analogy? It sounds, when you read for example, the Grimm fairy tales, you are expecting to get like these morality type of teaching of, oh, well, this is what we are trying to teach. You cannot steal. You have to be well behaved. This story was, I will say, a whole adventure. We are seeing a lot of different transitions. We see these kids practically going through different archetypes through they become those different archetypes. Kind of remind me to the Fool's Journey of the Tarot, per se, of the Major Arcana. A whole transition of, we begin with the Fools. We see these different transformations. And the end, I have to go a little bit against, not necessarily against, different than what Lara mentioned. I felt that the end gave me exactly what I was expecting. I actually, like, if the land where the shadows, how is that pronounced? The shadows fall? Is that the way that it's said? If that is like the conclusion of our story, this is the place where Mossy and Tangle are going to rest. This is the end of the cycle. We are finally seeing them achieving that goal. I don't need to need no more. Like the adventure was on land, and I don't know. It was a great story, and it's the first time that I read it, and I am going to be honest. I read it was today, and I went into a loophole. I didn't know that this man inspired was Lewis Carroll, and practically the author of the Lord of the Rings and Narnia read this story and got inspired by them. So it's incredible. Yeah.
Yay. I'm so happy to hear all that.
Amy just say, this is where they're going to rest. And I'm like, no, this is where they're going to live.
Both are true. Yeah.
You know, they're finally out of the trials and tribulations. Now they'll live in peace. So the big dichotomies, the big paradoxes within the tale is just, it's beautiful.
The story begins rather as a simple fairy tale, but it seems to me that the symbolism gets heavier and more rich as the story progresses. So it hooks us in the beginning as a traditional fairy tale and even features storytelling as a device in the beginning of the tale. But again, as the story progresses, the tone and the symbolism shifts and keeps getting more abstract and more complex as you progress towards the outcome, I guess we'll say. But the way it begins with storytelling almost gives me the idea that we're being instructed on how to apply this story to our lives in the way that the characters are applying the stories that they're hearing to their experiences. So, for example, the story begins with Mossy hearing stories from his great aunt, and we're also told later that he likes to sit on a mossy rock and read himself. And she inspires him to look for the golden key at the rainbow's end or beginning. This golden key is sort of a MacGuffin before that term existed, and he is lured by this idea to a fairy forest, to a rainbow that shines even in night, because we're told that the rainbow of fairyland does not rely on sunlight the way ours does. Once he finds the golden key, the narrative shifts to another fairy tale beginning about a young girl named Tangle, who's been neglected but has spent all day reading the tale of Silverhair, or what we know as Goldilocks. And she's interpreting the signs around her by what she's been reading all day in that tale. Now, when Mossy finds the golden key, he doesn't know what it unlocks, but he sees this rainbow of giant rays of light of all the colors, and he sees beings traveling within the rainbow, within each color. I suspect that this will make sense at the end of the tale, and I wonder if he could have unlocked the rainbow with the key there at the beginning.
Right, but he had to get lost in order to find it. He had to, yeah. Right. I always interpreted that as like the passage to the underworld moment, very much like the rainbow Bifrost connecting to the other worlds. This kid is just, I'm not sure. I remember as a kid, I didn't really catch any of the allegories. And as I got older, I started to wonder more and more, did this kid just pass away and he's like transitioning through this portal, and we're joining this journey that is far darker than I imagined, but is leading to this brilliant other world. And he's going through this transition, and this key, it's so symbolic, just like Hecate, the key bearer, the protector of children, the guide of children. Grandmother in the story very much reminds me of that. And the key that this child is carrying as this mysterious place that leads him to different worlds. The key was kind of amazing because it didn't just unlock a place. It was the entire pursuit of where that place was, the keyhole. Where is it? It was that entire journey that unlocked the ability to find the place where the shadows fall. And I think he had to sort of get lost in the underworld in that sort of Greek journey to be able to find it. And I loved that. It very much reminded me of the Bifrost and the passage to the other worlds.
I think about it, Via, because you read it when you were very young, right? So you read it with the eyes of a child. And I'm 50, and I never knew this story. So I don't see death. Yes, there's death, but it's like all the very multiple deaths that we go through in life, that we must go through in order to find peace, to find I wish we will have what we have at 50 when we were 17, but then we wouldn't be 17, right? The wisdom has to fall in place when it's the right time. And to see that, yeah, they grow old and then they grow young again. And I'm really impacted by that. As you can see, I've repeated that a number of times already. And, but to me is living, is those moments when you feel that there's no way out and that you need to dismember yourself and you need to dissolve yourself and you need to, let the waters wash you away. And then, when Mossy finds the old man in the sea and he puts him on the bath and he's clutching that key, and it's been years, and he's holding on to that key so earnestly, and it's like, were you supposed to hold on to one thing your whole life? Is it an obsession, or are you very goal oriented? Like, which is it? There's a lot of, like I say, a lot of paradoxes, a lot of ambiguity on the tale, but the author really does, the art is ardent. I mean, it really impacts you and makes you think. And I think is beautiful. What I see, like I said, is like how many times have I have to die in this lifetime to go back again? And right now I'm going through that rainbow, freedom, and like you come to an age when you don't give a crap about anything, and then there's going to be another stone in which you trip or you need to turn, later on. So that is beautiful.
So we have this fairyland place, this land of fairies. We already are starting with the idea that we are going to go to this fantastical place. The key itself, which I find funny, is that lost importance as we go through in the story. Not necessarily is not that it's not important. Is that Mossy finds it, and now what? Yes, I have the key, but the key is not the topic of the story. We see these different characters like the flying fishes. We see a lot of the colors seems to be so symbolic. We see the men of the earth, the men of the sea, the men of fire, of the fire, which is funny, as Laura mentioned, how age seems to be important. However, age does not equal to be old. You have this appearance of age, but not necessarily that you are older. It's more like that essence of wisdom. It definitely reminds me to these features that are showcased in the different mythologies and stories about fairies, but also at the same time, I like to take in consideration that the author, because I did read a little bit about him, he was a theologist. And definitely there is a little bit of Christian theology, like, well, not necessarily Christian theology, but there are like theology behind this. And as Laura mentions, the number 7 is very repeated in this place. And in Christian theology, the number 7 definitely has a lot of importance, which typically showcases like perfection and end of the cycle is the perfect number of God or whatever. So the story is definitely rich in characters, is definitely rich in analogies. But there is a point. I do think that at the end they do die, but not die as in, oh, poor kids, they have passed away. Sadness. It's more like, okay, you finish this world. Let's go to the next one. I don't know. It was very interesting. Also, I seen there when grandmother is offering fish and the fish dies and this winged creature comes out of the fish. I was thinking like, maybe is this like the soul of the fish? Is this story talking to us about death and transformation and getting rid of the body and being released of these material chains? I don't know. This story is heavy.
Definitely the cauldron is like the cauldron of transformation, like Carrie went, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and then when Tangle and Mossy, when they eat that fish that has been on that cauldron, they are transformed themselves because they start understanding by eating transubstantiation, right?
Yeah.
They eat the sacred body of the animal that sacrificed itself because it's the greatest good, apparently. So now the kids learn these languages and they repeat that they understand, but just to a certain level, that they know these things are meaningful, but to a certain degree. Like they never really understand fully. And it's that chase of Carryway, right? The transformation and the chase that is never ending. And I don't know, it's just fascinating. The more I think, the more fascinated about it.
Yeah, I'm going to be honest, Via. This book that mixes like the theology aspect, the analogies, the fantasy. As Aaron said, I started reading the book, this story, thinking that it was just a fairy tale, and I honestly think that it's not a simple tale. I think that it is a more heftier work.
I agree. It took me a few reads for it to really sink in. I sort of interpret the story as not being a fairy tale at all, but really being an almost a child's eye explanation for the transition of life and death and the inevitability of it. I had always interpreted the children as dying at the very beginning. When Tangle goes into the woods, I interpreted that as her dying from neglect in the forest or being lost in the forest. And the same for Mossy. I figured that was their transition out of the world of the living that they knew, which was a world of suffering and pain. And then they enter into this other world and are undergoing this journey of transformation to ready themselves for reemergence. And I sort of saw the fact that it ended at the place of fire, that fire was the final gauntlet to walk through, that they had to be reborn in fire before they could finally find that place where the shadows fall and make their way up there. And they'd gotten through the fireland and the shadows are up there dancing and they realize that that's where they're going to be going. I always interpreted that as rebirth, that these children who had died are now going to be reborn or move on to the other world or move on to the newer world like Tir na Nog or Elysium or, some great otherworldly space. And I thought the symbolism of making them go through trial of water, a trial of earth, a trial of fire, I thought it was just so fascinating. And I interpreted the story very dark as a kid, but in a good way. Dark, like explaining to me that there is a great adventure after death. It kind of reminded me of the line from Peter Pan, to die would be an awfully big adventure. And I sort of felt like these kids were experiencing this awfully big adventure. The biggest mystery we could ever know, our species ever knows, is what the hell's happening afterwards. And I sort of interpreted it that way. And it gave me a lot of hope. It gave me a great sense of spiritual direction, and it impacted my witchcraft because it's funny you bring up that little fish owl guy. I always thought he was her familiar spirit, and she sent him to go get the kids and help them transition. And then when the time came, basically she's initiating these kids into magic by giving them this familiar who gives their flesh. And now these kids can understand language. They are happier. They are full. They are able to better live in this world. It's almost like she transitioned these children into magicians for their journey. And it's sort of, I interpreted that as like the witch's journey of, getting a familiar, making a pact with a great spirit at the crossroads, being gifted powers from that pact and that connection. There is so much witchery and paganism in such a very Christian tale that it's blended the symbolism in a way that was, I thought, really beautifully done and embraced the idea of the other world and heaven and Tirnanog and Elysium all is an equal idea. This place where shadows fall. I loved seeing how much magic there was into this, and I really liked the little fish owl guy. I really liked that he was given these. I love the whole idea that these things are like bathing these kids with their feathers and stuff. It was just such a transition, like, oh, these familiar spirits are making these kids into magicians, into witches. Or at least that's how I started to interpret it.
If I had read about the flying fish in a modern story that was written now, I totally would have thought that they were inspired by Studio Ghibli. And so it's almost mind-blowing to read it in a Scottish text from the 1800s. When Tangle is led by these flying fish to the woodland cottage, she meets a beautiful woman, and she's clothed in natural green, and even her hair appears to have a tinge of green to it. And yes, she has her cauldron of transformation within. Any thoughts on what type of character or being the grandmother is?
Crossroads spirit. I love that line in the book where the kid's like, how old are you? And she's like, oh, I'm thousands of years old. And she's like, you don't look it. And the old lady said, you don't think I do? Don't you see how beautiful I am? Like, that's the very notion that, of course, I'm beautiful. I'm old. That's so awesome to me. I'm an old wizened woman. I'm thousands of years old. You can't tell I'm beautiful. I love that. She's such a witch. She's this crossroads character, this guide of children and lost souls. But she herself doesn't go on the journey.
I thought of her a lot about like Mother Earth, right? Mother Earth, Grandmother Earth, if you will. In that cauldron, Carrie Wynn, it just reminded me. I mean, I just took the course in Kerrywood, so it's like, yeah, here. But yeah, it's like Mother Nature or Grandmother Nature, if you will. At one point, actually, I must say, when the kids are looking for each other and they can find each other, it reminded me a lot of sun and moon energy, right? The sun running and the moon chasing after, and then the moon coming out and the boy, the sun, or whichever is which celestial body. So with the grandmother, it will be a completed Holy Trinity, my Holy Trinity, right? The sun, the moon, and the earth. But yeah, she totally reminds me of kind of like an earth spirit. And she could be, as a crossroad transformation, could be any of all of them, right? Hecate, Morgan, Kerwin, you know. Yeah, that's what I got on grandmother.
Yeah, same. I'm very happy that you mentioned, Laura, like Mother Earth. I was perceiving like this representation of nature. I was thinking about a fairy godmother. I was thinking a witch. But I'm going to be honest. There was like a point that I was thinking more like this fairy godmother or even an ancestor. I was actually, because I did find very, very interesting that this character presents herself to Tangle as, call me grandmother. That's my name. It's not my title. It's not what I am for you. It's not that I am related to you. It's my name. So, and interestingly, it's not, she wasn't calling herself mother as in I birthed you. It's more like from me came your, who make you be here. So I was thinking like this figure of Mother Earth, maybe a deity. I don't know. There was a point that even Titania came to mind, but I was feeling a little bit beyond because I was already giving the idea that these kids were diving into the fairylands. So that's why what kind of makes sense for me. But I will say that the idea of Mother Earth definitely fits better. And we see a lot of green, a lot of natural elements onto her beauty, like diamonds, like jewels. Yeah, absolutely. That's what it came to me from her.
And you know what? Definitely an ancestor, because when we work with ancestors, right, we're like, come on, answer me. Open a door, right? I see the doors. I know you have doors there. Knock, knock, knock. Let me in. Tell me the secret, blah, blah. No, she's going to open the door when she's good and ready. And then the child is like, I've been here begging to be let in. And grandmother says, I've been watching you the whole day. You're not alone. You're not cared for. I care for you. I've been watching you. But I will open the door when I'm good and ready, you know, like typical grandmother and or an ancestor, you know, when we work with the ancestors and we beg and plead and call and they're like, yeah, I will answer when I'm good and ready. You know, it's kind of like it's giving that energy. So, it's very much like, you know, like a related ancestor that you never met, but is there and it's on your, you know, how do you say, la bóveda de ancestors?
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like your spiritual court, I guess?
That, yeah.
And although grandmother is so nurturing and affectionate when Tangle is at her cottage, she knows that Tangle still must go on her own journey, and she puts the child out of the house when it's time. So Tangle and Mossy must go through this journey, and Tangle eventually reaches the Old Man of the Sea. I believe he refers to grandmother as his daughter, which is an interesting aspect too, if we're considering grandmother as this spirit of nature, this goddess of nature. We get the idea of the living creatures of the earth coming from the sea.
Well,
yeah, I love that idea. Like, you know, the sea is the great primordial birthing pot. It's the womb. And the idea that grandmother came from the sea, and probably, I'm guessing they don't really explicitly state it, but I always wondered if the Old Man of Fire was the oldest of them all, and they all came from him. And it was, you know, just how fire was the, you know, the birth of earth. It was all burned, made in flames and in the great crucible, and then water developed, and then from water came earthy life and living things. It sort of felt like it was following an evolutionary cycle.
Did it ever occur to you that the kid playing with the spheres is the actual Big Bang?
Yes, I see. Yes. And then the kid had this, and then the snake, and I was like, oh, the snake represents like the snake of the universe, the kundalini, the serpent, the great serpent. Yes, I always thought, oh, that kid is like playing fire, the Big Bang, boom, like that. You're awesome.
Blown. I'm beyond.
So are you. Thank you for sharing this tale, because we have that information, right? There's a lot of information that we get to fill ourselves.
Right.
Thank you, Arthur. So if grandmother is the youngest and the one that has contact with the children, she's the earth.
Right.
Then her dad, right, is the ocean. And then the ocean, old man ocean says, I'm going to send you with the oldest of them all. And this is the beginning, is the child, is the beginning. And he's playing with the spheres, you know, and she understands Tangle. She's like, I know there's a meaning, and I see a glimpse of something, but she's just fascinated with it, seeing it as it happened, right? And she says, I don't know if I've been here for a minute or for a year, right? And what is the Big Bang? It's happening right now, but it happened 13 million years ago, billion, but it's happening now. So that child at the center of it, that fire at the center of it, it's playing with the spheres right here, right now. And we are so far removed from that, right? But it's happening right now, which always fascinates me. And so if we go back with the lineage, right, then the older one has to be the fire, which is the baby. And that brings you into the inner child. That brings you into in order to be plentiful and complete in your being, you have to be in touch with that inner child, which is the oldest part of you, but is the youngest part of you, and is within you. And in order to find it, you have to go so deep. You have to go and dive head on into the nothingness. And like Tango said, I didn't know if I took a breath. I just know I had to dive, and I did. I mean, this tale is so full of meaning and magic, and
yeah.
I can talk here for days about this tale.
Me too. I loved it. It somehow blends mystical, animistic pagan themes with Christian themes, with evolutionary science themes. And it's all completely merged in a way that makes me feel like this author had a very good spiritual and existential understanding. That this person wasn't just thinking from the realm of his religion, he was thinking from the realm of spirituality for everyone.
Which, allow me to add, which I find very interesting, that one of his sermons or theological ideas as a Christian, because he was a Calvinist and he was fully opposed with the idea of predestination. He actually, I find interesting, he was talking about salvation as in God not punishing after death, more like any type of circumstance, like, difficulties in life. It was God like try certainly to teach, but I don't know how to explain it in English properly, but pretty much he was saying, hey, God is not sending anyone to hell. If we believe in a God of love or whatever, he's going to save everyone. So relax, just go through the process to learn what he's trying to teach. And I find that interesting because even until today, within Christianity, a lot of people are still debating who's going to go to hell or who's going to go to heaven or whatever. Taking in consideration that mindset, I find this story very illuminating because he pretty much is talking, if we assume that he's talking about these different transitions, or if he's making an analogy of creation, he is still talking about mercy and purification and life after death. And again, I'm going to keep using the word transformation. We touched briefly on the old man of the fire, the old man of the sea, of the earth, and of the fire. But what do you think about Tangle calling Mossy, hey, you look like the old man of the sea. Wait, no. You look like the old man of the earth. Wait, no. You look like the oldest man. If we are talking that these are independent characters, and I'm not saying that he became them, what do you think that means when she looks at this Mossy and she's like, wait, you look like all of them at the same time? What the heck?
I always interpreted that as his moments with those people shaped him completely and changed him in such a way that it became truly visual, that his whole spirit has now become transformed and enlightened by these beings. He's no longer who he was. He is what he is now because he has now been enlightened by the path of earth, by the path of water, by the path of fire. He is now his most complete self and has now taken on the form of all three of these spiritual creatures or entities that formed him and formed the foundation of who he has now become, just as grandmother fundamentally formed who Tangled would wind up being. She would wind up being a beautiful, old, kind woman, just like grandmother. And I always interpreted that in some ways they were meeting themselves. Again, I always thought the kids were already dead. So I thought in many ways they were meeting versions of themselves in different transitionary periods, seen through the eyes of these deities or seen as these forces. There's so much interpretation to it, but that had always been what I got, was these children were completely changed fundamentally and enlightened in such a way that they have now become that which those divine presences that guided them. They are now part of that, and now they can go where the place where the shadows fall. Now it's their time to join that because they have now been spiritually cleansed and enlightened. And honestly, I love your point about his sermon. That's such a great point. I love this story because unlike so many Christian-based stories at the time, including the Chronicles of Narnia, this is not a story of irredeemability and redemption. This is not about redemption. This is not the Christian story of who goes to hell and who doesn't. This is the assumption that the afterlife or the life going forward is a journey. It's a hard journey, but it's not irredeemable. It's not, the path of fire doesn't mean hell. It just means heat. It just means time. It means pressure. That's what forges a universe. That's what makes a planet. That's what makes a diamond. That's what makes things, that's what transforms things, heat, time, and pressure. So I love that his interpretation of the afterlife had nothing to do with this, for me, frankly, very disturbing idea that there's ultimate punishment, even for children. His assumption going in is you're on a journey. The journey's going to be tough, sometimes lonely, sometimes taking more time than you thought. But it's a journey, and you will get to some good place in the end because you'll just keep going, and that's life. But it wasn't some terrible place. There was no irredeemability. You know, like, it always bothered me at the end of Narnia that some people were cast into the darkness because that's such a Christian view. The people who weren't on Aslan's side are now cast into this darkness forever. I don't like the idea of irredeemability. That doesn't sound cyclical or with nature. Nature's not irredeemable. Everything has a transition, a time, and all things suffer, and all things have a point of life and death, and nothing gets out of that. Every single thing that lives suffers. And the fact that he didn't make the story about suffering or redemption and simply made it about the fact that this is the human condition in this and other worlds, that was so profoundly moving to me and really reinforced to me that this man was not speaking as a Christian. He was speaking as someone with a profound existential love and understanding for what spirituality and what the other world and what God could even be to us, which is not a place of irredeemability, but is a place of transition.
When grandmother sends them on their journey, first they go through the fairyland forest, but eventually they come to, as we've mentioned, the land where the shadows fall. It's a bit like a wasteland, and we do start to see a lot of underworld entrance symbolism here. Open chasms, rocky cliffs, and things like that. And so they're in a wasteland, and they can see shadows falling in the wasteland, but they wonder where these shadows come from. And I started to think of like the Platonic idea of the realm of supreme forms or supernal forms. But it describes some of these shadows as really rather mundane. Images like children playing with dogs and couples arguing. They're just really glimpses of life, which supports this idea that they could be on a journey between incarnations, and they're curious to experience where these shadows are coming from.
I think is the quintessential, is not the destination, but the journey. I mean, it really is that, because when you think about it, okay, now they're, at the end of the tale, they're inside the rainbow. So that means they're going to go up, right? And eventually ended up at the land where the shadows all come from, which will be the land of living, or maybe another realm, right? Or living your life in different ways, where you are not an spectator of the mundane and the good. When you are in life no longer yearning for a world in which you don't belong, but now you are part of that world, and now you will be the one casting the shadow on others. Thus, you will be the elder or the wiser person guiding those who are just beginning the journey. And again, it's not that I'm negating the fact that, okay, this is the journey of these children who die. But what if it's not about dying? What if it's about life? Because even though the tale is 100 and change years old, it really applies to today, right? We are in a constant yearning of something that we're not. And just to find out that when we stop clasping the key with such intensity and just go with the consensual flow, and we walk on water, we don't make holes on the water anymore, but we walk on, then we find like, oh my God, here it is. It fit, right? I fit where I thought I was never going to fit. Turns out I fit. I found my keyhole. So I don't know if I answered your question, but I'm just philosophizing here. Because I am convinced that, and maybe I'm in denial that the children die. But I think whether they die and go to a new realm or whether it's coming of age, is that, you yearn so much for something that is not there. And then eventually it's not, like I say, it's not the destination, but the journey. You're going so much for, where is it? Where is it? Where is it? And then when they encounter each other at the end, it is said that they spend a lot of time sharing stories. So they're not in any kind of hurry per se to just go, they have to trade stories and, oh my God, like, where you been? And
yeah.
Just like we don't know for sure what happens after this existence,
Yeah.
we don't necessarily know what happens before this existence either. This could be pre-carnate souls experiencing the creation of the universe. As we talked about the old men of the various elements also creating the universe. But it is funny that they go through a literal valley of shadows.
Yeah.
And it's also not like the shadows in the allegory of the cave, where they think the shadows are reality. Tangle and Mossy know there's something else out there that is casting the shadows, and it inspires them. But they get separated, and Mossy gets to sort of take a direct line because of the golden key, whereas Tangle goes through transformative ordeals. So she meets the old man of the sea. We've talked about him a lot. This was, in my reading, kind of one of those spots where I thought, okay, this is the underworld, because she had reached old age and then sort of gets renewed in his healing bathwaters. I don't know if we want to go any more into the old man of the sea, but he doesn't know where the shadows come from either. So he sends her to the old man of the earth. And each character, she gains something from them when she encounters them. So she gains the understanding of the nonsense of the fishes, but she also regains a bit of her youth.
Yeah.
And then she goes to the old man of the earth, who is not old appearing, but he's staring down into what she thinks is his long hair, but turns out to be a giant mirror of divination. Yet he doesn't know where the shadows come from either, so he sends her into a pit to meet the old man of fire. And I believe it said she stands on the precipice of the pit for 7 years, contemplating if she can throw herself into it or not. And then she comes to the old man of fire, who we've also mentioned already, who is the youngest appearing of all. It's a child playing with his spheres of the cosmos.
Yeah.
The old man of fire says he can give her directions to the realm where the shadows are created, although he's not been there himself. And she has to follow a serpent.
I love that the serpent is not the bad guy in this story. The serpent was a guide. The serpent, like Lucifer, light bearer, Promethean gods, is taking this child on a journey of wisdom. And it's hard. It's in a sweltering hot land. It's scary. It's new. She just wants to see her kindred spirit again, her other half. And this snake is not being interpreted as a bad guy. No, he works for the universe itself. I loved that. I love that this snake isn't symbolic of some great adversary or trick, or even somebody or a trickster spirit. This is a spiritual guide sent from the creation, from the crucible of the universe. This old man of fire in his sweltering hot place, playing with the cosmos. the universe itself is sending this spiritual guide to lead this girl somewhere that's even a mystery to it. I loved that idea. I love the idea that in some ways I felt like the place where the shadows fall is also an allegory for God, an unknowable thing, an untouchable, unknowable, unseeable thing. And each of these great spirits are guiding her. They're more powerful than her. They're ageless. They're incredible. But even they don't know the great mystery of God. Even they don't quite know what lies at the very, very beginning. Even the oldest of them is like, oh yeah, I can tell you how to get there, but I also have not been there. So I love this. I love the idea that that snake is not the bad guy. He is a wisdom bringer.
And it's interesting that Tangle is given a serpent as a guide, but also that Tangle is the one who has to go through the transformative journey, which could be related to her neglected upbringing, maybe. I think there's a lot of ways we could go with this, but why was it the Tangle character? That's one explanation that came to my mind, is that it was about realizing what a person is capable of, what she is capable of. She had to unlearn what she had learned and come into the presence and experience the divine and come into their power and her power. Laura, I see you moving around.
Because, of course, I'm going to talk about feminism, and this time it took me 56 minutes. So you got to give me a medal or something. Here comes the feminist. In this world, we humans have divided everything into masculine and feminine because we're stupid and we don't know how else to separate things. And we have found this easy and practical separation of masculine and feminine. We know that there is more to the human experience than being feminine and being masculine. Those are the strengths, right? But again, in our immense stupidity, we have divided everything into masculine and feminine. And Tangled, a girl, she's, by the way, every woman, because she is a little bit of Annie, the orphan. She's a little bit of Cinderella. And she's a little bit of Ricitos de Oro was the name with the three bears.
Merida?
Goldilocks. Yeah.
And then she's also like the daughter of Mother Nature, right? So, or the granddaughter. But being the feminine aspect, right? The anima and the animals. She is in the cauldron of transformation. She's the femme. She's just jealous, right? And she don't have a key. He has a key. An external phallic, symbolic, transformative thing, right? And I think if you go that route of comparing why one has to go to this journey and the other one has to go to this journey, it is said that feminine energy is inwards and contemplative. So I think our divine femme takes us to those kinds of transformations where our internal, contemplative, and perhaps longer, but they are at the same time more able to repair. When we go deep into our psyche and do our shadow work, it's a feminine nature, it's a feminine ethic. And then the transformation and even the little privilege that Mossy gets, it's very outwardly transformative, like, yeah, you get to jump here and 3 stones and there you are, because there's no need for you to go so deeply. Also, we don't know where he's been because he was lost longer than she was. And he comes out of there older than she was. So it goes both ways because, again, gender and that division is just, we separate things that way. But yeah, I noticed, of course I noticed that, why does she have to do more? But at the end, she has more wisdom. So much so that when she sees Mossy at the end, she can see him on all his facets. And she has that deeper knowledge, so.
I agree. I loved her expression of femininity. I loved that she was this, I love that the story focused so much on her journey without him. That she's not a damsel in distress waiting around the whole time like, come and get me, I need you. No, she was like, okay, well, I don't know where you are, so I'm going to keep going. We're going to find this shadow place. I'm doing this. And no matter how afraid she was, even standing at every precipice, she talked herself through the bravery. She didn't have to have someone come save her or push her. She talked herself into going down in that valley. She talked herself into each of those things, no matter how afraid she was or confused, because she had total agency over her own path and she didn't need Mossy. And I loved that the story wasn't about them needing each other. They were kindred spirits on a parallel journey together. And they met when they met. They were here for a reason or a season. They fell in and out of each other's lives. And by the end, came back together, wiser, more individuated people. She can see him for who he is. She's had time to contemplate because she got there and waited for a little while, for a few years for him. So she represents so many facets of feminine life, from your menstruation through menopause, from these stages you step through until you become this wise crone figure, just like grandmother was when she met her. And she didn't need Mossy for that journey. She just had to keep going. And I love that agency that she had. And for such an older story, I kind of love that this wasn't about a big, brave lad with a sword coming to save his lost little princess. This is about this girl who's like, bitch, I've been through the woods. I can do this. I will see you on the other side. Loved it.
This is a little preview of an upcoming episode, so save this for later. But this falls in line with some of the earliest versions of feminine stories, feminine mythologies, where we have Inanna or Kore Persephone having to travel through the underworld and suffer some form of dismemberment or transformation before returning. So again, it's unbelievable the deep influences, the pagan threads that are woven into this story. And like you pointed out, Laura, when Mossy reunites with Tangle, she reached the other end of the rainbow before he did. It's as if she took the direct route right through the Earth's core, which was the fastest, but most difficult and transformative route, whereas Mossy had to travel the circumference. When they finally get reunited, he uses the golden key to enter into the cave and finds columns of colored light, which turns out to be the base of the rainbow, which is now penetrating into this cave. And I believe the journey turns out that they crossed from one end of the rainbow to the other. So what do we think it was all for? What happens when they reach this rainbow?
Well,
that is a tough one.
I guess I'm with the author. I suspect they got there. And I almost don't want to know. I don't want to know. There's things about the universe and about the afterlife that I don't want to know. I want that big shock, that big adventure, that big mystery. And I love that the end of this book is, it's up to you. Where do you think they go? It can be anything. It could be everything. And the fact that he gave that to us and you don't even know, he just says, I think they must have got there by now. That's so awesome. That's not giving it to you. That's not feeding it to you. He's just saying, and they went on their journey. I kind of desperately need to not know. I love the idea that they get to this rainbow staircase. They're marching up with every kind of creature of every type, which, by the way, just fundamentally as a queer person, I love that the rainbow was this place where everything of all kinds are, and they're on their way to the rainbow, and they're going to march up that rainbow to a good new place, and everyone's coming with them. I love that. So I really hope I don't know what happens at the end, because that is the best part, is after a journey like that, what greater mystery could there be after that? I don't even want to know.
I kind of already gave my version of what I think happens. I think, because if they are at the other end of the rainbow right now, they are the ones going on the rainbow. So living their life or living their afterlife or living their journey to a new life or whatever. And I think physics, like now they are the ones casting the shadow. So the place where you cast the shadows is actually the rainbow bridge.
Right.
Right. And is the life of the shadow people actually the life as we understand it, or is it actually the transition into another life or an afterlife? And what if when you go to the other life, to the other end of the rainbow, there's a key that falls from the end of the rainbow, but there's also like new kids. So like instead of growing old, you grow young, and then you start again, right? Because that's kind of like the whole premise of the tale, right? It's like rinse and repeat.
Unrelated to witchcraft, but I think that it goes along with the topic. I had the opportunity to finish watching a show called The Good Place. And on top of that, I am currently reading a book called The Bones Fall in a Spiral, written by Martellus. And it's a book about necromancy, And I find interesting that the topic of the Good Place show, beyond the entire drama and circumstances of the character, is how alive the afterlife is. It's another life, different, similar, whether you fly, you float, you transform, or you grow older or younger, it's another life. It's another transition with its own rules and features and characteristics. I do hope that those that have difficulties in this life can obtain peace in the next one, and those that have a sense of wickedness and do at least get not redemption, the transformation, like, hey, let me hit your hand, you were an asshole, like I want you to see what you did. I am not at this point of my life like a firm believer of a pit of hell and fire, like no, but many cultures do share the idea that wickedness and evil is going to be paid to an extent. What extent each culture has its own extent. I think that I love how my husband is he grew in Buddhism, and he talks about different Buddhist hell and all of that, and the reincarnation process. And very different of how people talk about karma in this new age era. Like, no, karma is not, oh, you did something and now your glass broke. No, karma is like, listen, your reincarnation in your next life is going to be a worm. You misbehave, dude. Like, you know what I mean? So whatever route we decide to follow, I think that the cool thing about this story, and latching a little bit with what you mentioned, Via, is a story about process and transformation. And we see, as Laura mentioned, the cyclical aspect of how everything goes up and down. And I did enjoy to see, and I will reiterate, as I said earlier, I think that the ending was perfect. It's perfect. They went through the process. They went through the trial. And I do think that it's about death. But at this point, and that's why I mentioned The Good Place and why I mentioned the necromancy book, my perspective of death has changed. I don't find it horror. I don't find it sad. I don't find it dark. It's part of life. It's part of our process. It's our metamorphosis. And some get there sooner, some other get later, but we all get there. And I think that this story falls perfectly with that idea.
Absolutely.
I didn't really do the end justice because, again, the language just keeps getting more ecstatic and symbolic and beautiful. But we do find out that when Mossy and Tangle get reunited in the cave, the rainbow is penetrating as columns of light. And we do find out that the golden key will unlock the columns of the rainbow, so that they can enter and ascend the spiral staircase within, which again brings me back to the beginning when he saw beings ascending the rainbow and perhaps could have unlocked it then. I love the thoughts of these colored rays and different ascending paths, which trigger in my mind thoughts of the color symbolism of the Hermetic Kabbalah, and even the serpent that Tangle followed to reach this place, like the glyph of the Hermetic Kabbalah tree of life with the serpent that is able to connect all paths on the tree, and so travel between any worlds that it chooses. We've talked about the cauldron and the similarity of the cauldron of transformation and grandmother's fish as the idea of a familiar. What are some other ways that this tale has inspired you or informed your personal practice, Via?
It definitely helped me take a less hard stance on things. The book gives me the idea that it almost gives me more of an agnostic vibe to some of the things I believe in, where I embrace more of the mystery of what I don't know and what could be than trying to seek absolutes or answers. This book is so much about how there aren't absolutes, how there's always a next step, there's always a next journey, and you don't know what it is, and it's going to be fantastic and terrifying. And isn't that the thrill? Isn't that the thrill of life, is the fantastic, terrifying? And so this book had that impact on me, where I thought, over the years, the more I read it, every time I read it, I circle back to this idea that it's the unknowable and the mystery part of occultism that I love so much. It's the mystery. And this book teaches me a lot about how to not seek for an absolute answer, how to not reach for God so far up and so far away, but to remember that God is in every one of these moments of transformation. God's spirit, universe, the power, the magic, that pool, that well from which we draw all of our power and our gifts and our strengths. It is in all of these transitionary moments that build you and give you your power and give you your identity. And so I think for me, the book is a constant reminder to not seek a firm answer, but instead to keep my mind and my magic and my practice very much open to any of the mysteries, and fear none of those transitions. Fear none of that fire. Fear not that water or that earth, because I will have to go through it, and so will every single living thing. We will all suffer through it. We will all go through the fire, the water, all of it. And this book is a constant spiritual reminder to me that this is a shared experience for all life forms. And isn't that sort of a blessing that none of us gets out of this without sharing in this one thing? We might have different lives, different personalities, different privileges, but we will suffer through this, all of us together, to the very end, and whatever comes beyond. I love that. And I think that's the biggest impact it had on me.
And you do a little bit of everything. I enjoy your Instagram feed, and I see the fairy girls that you sculpt, but I also see pastries sometimes and some very wicked looking traditional witchcraft sometimes, and I love it all. So,
oh yeah, I'm one of those types.
What are the sculptures about?
Well, plant spirit animism and veneration is a tremendously large part of my practice and always has been. Sacred plants are a big part of the way my family interprets some of the spiritual world, and animism being a deep part of our family. I was always raised with the idea that plants are living, they are inhabited by spirits. Those spirits are your brothers. You have to sit with them and respect them the same as you would respect your brother, the eagle or the salmon or a human being. That tree and that salmon and you are you're all kin. This is a concentric world we're living in. We're family. And so because the plant spirits play such a big part of my practice, especially in theogens and psychoactive herbs that alter our spirits and our minds, I am a dreamer. Dreaming magic is a huge part of mine. I write a lot about it. And a lot of the way that I do my dreaming work, or a lot of my transformative work, is through the use of plants. So I wanted altar sculptures for myself at first that would represent my plant spirits. And in my family, the poppy is our spirit. So Papaver somniferum, or any poppy of any kind, my sister, my mom, we all have tattoos and we all have poppy, gear. It's just such a huge familial symbol. So I started making these statues I couldn't quite figure out where to start. And so I made some cacao and I attended a cacao ceremony, and I came back and I made the cacao lady. And I had been so immersed in this ceremony. I've been so like thrilled by it. It opened everything new. So I thought, I'm going to immerse myself into each of these plants that transform me and build their altar statue for them. So I made the cacao woman. Then I was like, well, I really like tea. Then it became the tea lady. Then it was like, oh, I love pot. I'm going to do pot lady. I'm going to make like 4 of these stoner ladies. So I made a couple of cannabis ladies. And after a while, I realized I wanted to do one devotional piece for each plant spirit that is of great quality to me. Wine, weed, tobacco, the shit I like. So, and, when I picture the divine, when I picture things that are, divine, I think of sex, passion, beauty. So I think of, like hot, busty ladies. So, you can tell because my plants are a lot of very top heavy, attractive women. Because if I'm thinking of the divine, the first thing I think of God is I'm like, oh yeah, man, God, if there is a God, she's going to be like a foxy, very attractive woman. Just an absolute fox covered in flowers. So I got this idea in my head that that's what they are. And so I made the whole series of plants to represent this love I had for them and how I was sitting with each plant at the time and sort of absorbing them into my life, with the exception of tobacco, because me and her, we can't talk anymore. Me and her spent way too much time together growing up as a chain smoker. So, but yeah, that's where it started. And each plant spirit has the seed of her heart is the seed of that plant. So there's a grape seed inside the wine woman. There's a datura seed inside of the datura woman. There's a lot of hemp seeds inside the cannabis lady. But I merged the plants with the clay, and that's where it all got started. Was, man, I live for these plants, and they're like God to me. And God is just a very, very attractive woman covered in plants who gets you high.
That is so incredible. And are you making these specifically for your own practice, or are you making them for other people as well? Are they for sale? For commission? I
blend. I did work for Morgan Daimler. I made her a Flittish statue. Made them a Flittish statue. They also won one of my belladonna statues. I've made Hecate statues for different people, and once in a while I'll take a commission, but for the most part I do the art just to sort of express myself and do it for myself. But I never take, I don't like to barter money for it. I like to do trade. So if people can give me a really good idea and send me something that I might need that's a magical item, like specific kind of blessed candles or specific kinds of metals, I usually barter in that, and then I'll make the statue. So I do some commission work for other people, but for the most part, it's just me sort of trying to get all these ideas out of my head before they disappear.
That's perfect. Were there elements of the story that we did not cover that you wanted to touch on, or any ideas that you wanted to express that we didn't get to?
I just want to point out that I thought it was sort of hilarious that the last thing he says in the book is, and by this time I think they must have got there, when he spends the whole 80 pages of this book describing how these kids are losing track of time. 7 years here, 3 years there. I thought it was so funny that this whole time these kids are growing older. They're getting age. They're going through this large span of time. And at the end, he's like, and by now, I'm pretty sure they finally got there after all that time spent. I love that the ending presents so much hope and a little bit of humor for this journey. And I'm really grateful that all of you were, inspired to talk to me about it. You've given me so many more ideas to actually think about. You've completely sort of changed the way I'm going to interpret it. Laura, I'm going to really start to focus more on the living aspect and the life aspect of this story and give that a lot more weight, because that presents a whole new dimensionality for me, which is what I love about this story is no matter who you're talking to, however they interpret it, it's going to change something in the way you see it. And talking to each of you and getting your perspectives has once again this book has brought transformation. And it's because I got to transform with you, and I got to take this journey through, water, earth, and fire with all of you. And I really appreciate that.
I think George MacDonald even wrote that readers may find meanings that the author did not intend, and that these meanings may sometimes even be better than the author's original intention, but fully acknowledging that we're all going to bring ourselves to these tales and find our own meanings. How about you, AB? Were there any things that we did not get to that you were hoping to?
Listen, you know how my brain works. You can notice how I tend to go all over the place when I'm talking. I do feel that this is a story that we can continue talking about for weeks. But I also do feel that at the same time, we did hit like the main topics, at least those that definitely impressed me. Listening you, Via, and Laura, like right now, for example, when Laura mentions like, okay, try to think about this as they are alive. This is the process that they're going through alive. I was thinking maybe my next challenge is maybe connect with the archetype of the man of the sea, the man of the earth and the man of fire, and see what can I learn from these dudes. Who knows? I don't know. I was actually thinking about it. Is there a way to get there? Is there a way to connect with them? What can I learn from them? Because if it was written about them, I mean, technically they exist. So I don't know. Let's find out. But this is a very, very cool story. And I do think that we do hit the point. However, I still wonder, what the hell with the key? What was the key? The story was not about the key. Why the key? Why the key? Why Mosley was so impressed by the key from the very beginning? Why the key? And I think that it was perfect. And actually, I had the opportunity to also read The Golden Key by the Grimm brothers, and it's the word. I mean, it's like very like this, but they don't say anything. A kid find a key, digs a hole, find a chest, and open the chest, and the key sees the wonders of the chest. What are the wonders? How did the kid find that key? It's insane. But yeah, no, it was amazing. I do feel that we did hit the points of the story. Yeah.
And Laura, any final thoughts on the tale that we did not get to?
I'm impressed, and I need to ask you, Via, how old were you when you read it the first time?
8 years old.
Yeah.
8 years old, so back in 1994-ish. That's when I first read it.
Very young. No, I'm impressed that it's been with you your whole life. This transformative, beautiful story. I don't know. I mean, I think the basics were touched on. I would love to talk about death and Mictlan and the 9 levels of death and all the trials and tribulations, and it mirrors that a lot, And also right now here in AB talking about what is the key? What is the key? Well, the key is just the thing to focus your energy, just like when you're doing magic, you focus your energy on a candle, or if you're Christian, you focus your energy on the cross. Or if you are a feminist, you focus your energy on Medusa, or, it's I don't know, it's just like a focal point, I think. But yeah, I'm convinced that this is more about as cliche as it may be, it's about the journey. It's about the journey. It's never about the destination, because we don't know. And like Via said, like, oh yeah, I hope they got there. Like, what? That's why when I got to the end, I almost throw the phone away, because I'm like, what do you mean? But then after I reflected on it, it's just beautiful. And no, I think we touch very good into most everything.
Right. The Golden Key is almost like the Ace of Wands or the Ace of Swords, maybe. It's like a shiny gift from the divine saying, go do this, you know? I'm surprised that we didn't get to spend more time on the trials of the elements. To the witches that are listening, you should read this story because it is very profound and beautiful. And like I said, I don't think we've really given it the justice it deserves. Any upcoming projects that anyone wants to talk about before we end here tonight?
I have a lot. I am going to be doing some workshops in person here in Chicago. So please follow my socials on Instagram. I'm Magia Cerati, MAGIA CERATI. You can also find me on Linktree as Magia Cerati. And these are going to be in person. So I'm going to do probably like 4 this year. And I'm not sure yet. But the first one is going to be on energy cleansing. And it's going to be a hands-on workshop. It really is a workshop. We're going to be working on learning the technique and the whys and the hows and the whos and the whens. And people are going to go home with the techniques, with learning the very little known fact, unless you're Aaron and my friend and know this. But I started doing cleansings before I started doing tarot, which most people will be like, what? Yeah, I was like 10 years old or whatever. And I want to do that. And I also will continue doing my Decolonizing the Goddess series online classes. Those will happen every second Sunday of the month. They're only $30. I have very good friends that keep telling me I should charge more. Thank you, good friends that tell me I should charge more. But we settle on $30 for now. And we are approaching the goddess culture, goddess tradition, goddess religion, seen by a decolonized eye focused on the goddesses of America. And when I say America, I speak about the continent. Basically, Mesoamerica, what is modern day Mexico, the so-called Aztec goddesses. So we're going to talk about a different goddess every month on the second Sunday of the month. Starting on March, we're going to have in-person women's circles. That is to be announced. And from last year, we started doing online women's circles the 4th Sunday of the month. And the online women's circles are for women and people to come and share stories, witness each other, validate each other, help each other, hold space for each other. Obviously, people of color go to the first, to the front of the line. There's a sliding scale. There's always going to be a sliding scale. You can pay $13 or $20 or $26. If you're privileged, please pay $26. If you need to pay $13, you're welcome to pay $13. If you cannot pay $13, you hit me up and we talk about something. But yeah, those happen every 4th Sunday of the month. And you can find all of my stuff on Linktree, on Instagram, on Facebook. And if you cannot find me, it's because you're not looking hard enough. Thank you, Aaron. Thank you. And of course, Lunatic Mondays.
As in now, the podcast, I have it on hold. Unfortunately, computer decided to be like, well, this Mercury in retrograde, I'm going to retrograde. And completely done. So, podcast on hold. I am creating like just short videos for my social media, but just short. I do want to focus a little bit more on my social media and on reality. I do like to connect with people, but so far I don't have anything planned yet. I do have a few ideas in the back of my mind because I am interested in like build a community, at least here in Orlando, POC focused, of course, but we are still planning it. So so far, what I do invite everyone is to check the content that I'm creating on my social media. Book reviews. I have like a ton of books that I am recommending that are really, really cool. And at the same time, just recommending stuff because I also want to learn. And but as in now, this is it. This is it for now.
AB's spell instructional videos are informative and gorgeous, so do check out AB's Witch Journal on Instagram.
Very simple, very beginner friendly. I will not teach you anything that I wouldn't do. So like that.
And Via, any current projects?
Absolutely. Keep your eyes out, folks. This year I will be featured in Llewellyn's Almanac and in their Witches Calendar. I wrote 2 essays, one about the how to work with blackberry spirits when the season comes, and another one about the power and the magic of witch rabbits and rabbit witches, which is going to lead into something pretty big, but, that's, under wraps right now. I also want to invite anybody in the Seattle area or anybody who can get to the Seattle area. Come March, I'm going to be hosting another walk. I do a walk each season. We started a couple back where I take people through the Seattle Chinese Garden and the South Seattle College Arboretum, some of the largest arboretum and Chinese garden in our city. I also take people on wilderness walks and wildcrafting walks. And this March, I got permission from Parks and Rec. They're going to come cut down some pine boughs as part of their regular maintenance, and they will allow me to come harvest the pine. So right in time for the pine pollen harvest, so we can harvest our own pollen together as a group. I can teach everybody how to make icing and frosting out of pine pollen, which is one of my favorite things to do every year, and how to make pine soda using pine needles. It's a nice self-fermenting soda. So everybody, if you're in Seattle area and you're interested, we're going to be doing that live. Parks and Rec is going to cut down the boughs and allow us to keep that. That way we're not damaging any property or harming any plants. So reach out to me in March, folks. You'll see stuff on my Instagram about it. Follow me at Via Hedera, and I will keep you looped in, and I'd love to see y'all.
Oh, that is so exciting. I want to live there.
Oh, it's very fun, very tasty. The pine pollen is very surprisingly sweet and good, and it's a very simple honey-based frosting, and being able to harvest it from the local trees in the hillsides has been just a huge hallmark of spring for me, and I'm really excited to invite people to come shake pollen out of trees and sift spiders out of pollen. And yeah, you have to sift the bugs out, but or you keep it for the protein, whichever. I don't judge.
And on that note, until we meet again, may all your journeys be filled with wonder.